If I've said it once, I'm going to say it again. Podcast guesting is hands down one of the best ways and quickest and most efficient ways to grow not only your podcast, but also your business. Today, we're talking with Nick, one of the founders of Eagle Rock CFO, which is a fractional CFO SaaS company, as well as they do strategy and so much more. We get into all of that today. But the important part of this conversation is really around how Nick was able to use podcast guesting to, within just 6 weeks, 50x the traffic to their website, as well as using SEO backlinks and all of that information, be able to really show up higher on Google searches. This is so incredibly important if you are someone who is thinking about launching a podcast or already has one and you want to be found by new audiences. We talk about what makes a great pitch, what are the strategies for repurposing content, how to ensure that you're being strategic within the episode to actually get results, and so much more. This was such a great conversation. So please join me in welcoming Nick to the podcast. Welcome to Podcasting Unlocked, the show for purpose-driven podcasters. I'm Alicia Galati, founder of Galati Media, and I'm here to share actionable strategies to help you amplify your message and grow your audience. Hello, Nick. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast talking all about podcast guesting. Let's go ahead and start with who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Nick. Nowadays, I run Eagle Rock CFO, which is a fractional CFO advisory firm that uses AI and other forms of technology to basically offer an elite level consulting experience, except at 1% the price point. Prior to that, I was CEO or CFO of 3 different companies, the largest of which was $100 million. And at my last company where I was CEO, it was about 100 people. That's where I discovered podcasting, both as a host as well as a guest, and have continued on into now my first entrepreneurial venture.
Oh, so exciting. Tell me a bit about that, getting into podcasting. What year was it? What kind of content were you creating and what kind of support did you get?
Sure. So I got into podcasting about a year and a half ago when I was running this software company called IdeaScale. I was CEO. They'd been around for about 12 or 13 years. And we realized that we could, a lot of our competitors were spending time on outbound outreach and paid advertising. And we were like, let's really focus on content marketing. So we put together an amazing blog, YouTube channel. And then we also started doing podcasting there initially as an experimental strategy. Let's see if this works. And then we really scaled it up. And there were 3 elements to our podcasting strategy. Number one, we appeared on something like 100 different podcasts related to our business over the course of about 6 or 7 months. So a lot of appearances there. Number 2, we hosted our own podcast where we talked with chief innovation officers, which was really our target market. And that was non-commercial. We just had them talk about what they were doing, even if they weren't customers, even if they were never going to use our software. And number 3, we held kind of a webinar series as well. That was a little bit more formal with speakers once every 2 or 3 months. And yeah, it was part of our core content marketing strategy, which over the course of 6 months led to like a 50x increase in our website traffic as well as our inbound leads.
That is so cool. Okay, so the few things that I want to highlight here for people who are listening, that kind of surge of podcast guesting is so strategic. And I know it feels like a lot. And always go back to what is your capacity?
It was a lot.
What are you able to accomplish? But podcast listeners listen to podcasts. And so having your own show where you can then redirect people, having a direct webinar where you can direct people, that is such an incredible strategy. And it's so important for getting your message out there. And then you said that the people you were interviewing, even if they weren't going to be clients or even if they, might never use their software, that you were having those conversations. And I think that that's a really important part too, is that so often I think podcasts, one, it goes back to what are your goals for your podcast? And if you're setting clear goals and you're like, all right, I want to interview potential clients, then you're not necessarily worrying about the downloads. You're worrying about what is that traffic to the website? How am I kind of closing the loop on these conversations and putting this person into either connection, collaborator, or client to be able to make it worth my time, right? Because a podcast can be a lot of work. So now, do you have a podcast now for your business and the things that you're doing now? And if not, I can understand why you would focus so heavily on podcast guesting.
So right now we don't have our own podcast. We probably will launch one in Q3. But at this
Nice.
point, we're really focused on appearing on established podcasts such as this that have established audiences that have kind of built the infrastructure because we think it's just a much higher use of our time rather than building an audience from zero.
Yes, it's so important. So when you're on podcasts like mine, and people will hear this afterwards as well as we get towards the end of the conversation, what is that point where you're like, okay, here's where I want you to go. Here's where I want you to go check out these things so that you are building up that network or that audience, I should say, instead of, all right, it was great having a conversation. Okay, bye. Right? We don't want to do that.
So I think that there's 3 points. One at the beginning of the conversation where I just name drop like who we are and what we do. Eagle Rock CFO, fractional CFO consultancy for mid-sized businesses. Already did that.
Right.
Third is at the end, which is again, drop the website and mention that we have free software. Sometimes I do that at the beginning. Our free software, by the way, is amazing in the sense that most people are paying somewhere between $500 to $1,000 a month for it, and we're giving it away for free. And then the third is obviously in chatting with hosts such as yourselves and asking that you guys put a backlink to our website so it helps increase our SEO and build our kind of credibility over time. We're already actually, not, despite the website being 2 months old, I think we're the third highest traffic website in our space already.
Yay.
Because we are very, very good at the kind of the SEO game, as well as not just the game, but putting good content out there that is helpful to our audience.
And are you, oh my God, there's so much gold in my strategy brain is like, oh, this. How are you repurposing that content to maybe on your social media platforms to really maximize your guest appearances as well? What does that strategy look like?
Sure. So first of all, so on the blog, we have a very strong blog. We're not repurposing that right
Okay.
now. We think that's a kind of low ROI use of traffic because we're already just getting, readers to the blog. For the podcasting content, I think we're doing it in 3 ways. Number one, hosts such as yourselves typically have media packages or post the links, and then we amplify that through our marketing networks, whether that be our socials or our partner socials. That's number one. Number two, where appropriate, we kind of, and where it's allowed by the hosts, we kind of create snippets or shorts and promote that. Obviously, tagging both the host and their business as well as ours to kind of get maximum visibility for both sets of audiences.
Yeah, that's really important. And I know that might feel like a lot of work, right? Especially if you're a podcast host and you're trying to guest at the same time. One thing that I would recommend for people who are like, okay, this feels like a lot, pick one, right? Of those three is like, this is what I'm going to focus on.
I will say we automate most of that, right? So at the point at which we get a media package, I think it requires 5 minutes of effort for all of that magical repurposing to happen. Thank God for both traditional technologies as well as AI technology.
Yeah, there's so many different ways that we can use this, right? And I think it's especially good for if you do have podcast hosts who are doing video where they can grab those video snippets already for you, then it makes it 10 times easier than having to run it through things like Opus Clips yourself. But I think that it is such an incredible strategy and it works really well, especially if you're just like, look, I'm going to maybe spend 2 weeks promoting this one episode that I was on. For the turnaround cycles that most social media platforms have, it's doable, right? Like you can keep talking about the same content and your person who's following you or who's interested in your services will maybe see one of those. It's okay.
Yeah, so it's a lot of effort. Again, that's why we are trying a broad-based strategy and again, to leverage existing networks and audiences such as yours, right? In all candor, because you're doing a lot of effort, you're putting in a lot of effort, and we'd love to leverage that rather than duplicate it and reinvent it.
Yes. So when it comes to kind of planning out this next podcast that you guys are going to have, what are some maybe lessons that you learned from that first one? I mean, I'm on my 5th podcast at this point, right? We've produced, tons of them, but personally hosting them, I always feel like I learn something new every time I launch and sunset a podcast. So what are some things that you're like, oh, I'm definitely going to take that, or I think I'm going to leave that in 2025?
Sure. So look, there's some technical stuff as lead with a hook, be short, be upbeat. There's all the kind of, have a catchy tune. There's all the technical stuff as well as distribution. So ignoring that for a second, I think one of the things that we're going to replicate from kind of our learnings is what's the content that is really interesting to people. And the thing that we're really going to focus on is case studies. I think people find narratives and stories a lot more interesting than kind of data or even just people chatting back and forth. And so Joe Rogan, right? Obviously his style is very unstructured conversational interviews, but I think, that works for a subset of people who've been extraordinarily successful. But I think in order to be targeted, we're really going to focus on case studies and narratives. Think of like the true crime podcast you listen, except not related to true
Right.
crime because that is not our business.
Yes, I think that's such a good point too, right? Is like you have to find what's going to work best for you. And right, so like your business model, a case study would make sense because then it's like, here's this thing, here's this story, here's this example that you can then create tons of additional content around, white papers, etc. Like there's so much that you could do with that to then have that as the core content, or even backtracking it, writing that white paper, having your team write that white paper, or AI, whomever, and then, create it into a more narrative podcast. There's so much, right, that you can do. And I think that it's really about being strategic around what is the goal of this show. Is it to entertain, right? And that there's nothing wrong with those podcasts. But if your goal is to drive business back to yourself, then you have to really be strategic. What are some, I know you're kind of doing the broader messages now, redirecting people, getting those backlinks, making sure that the SEO is on point, and which is so extremely important, especially for people who are looking for fractional CFO support. What are some other things that you're considering as you're getting towards this next launch?
I think the rest is kind of just focused on two things, right? Number one, serving our existing clients, because we're very fortunate that we, even though we are now 6 weeks old as a business, we have paying clients. And number two is kind of that email outbound outreach. So we have a very, very strong, email, LinkedIn, whatever networks work. We are doing pretty broad-based, high volume, consistent outreach every single day to have lots of conversations. Our aspiration is from whatever channel, we want to have 60 new meetings every single week between my business partner and I. And that requires a lot of throughput in order to be able to achieve that goal. Having 60 meetings a week is 12 meetings a day.
Yeah, it's a lot. And you're giving value, right? In the majority of those meetings. And I think that's
I think about half of them,
priority.
right? Like half of them in all candor just end up being introduction calls. And for half of them, we, have conversation saying, this is how we can help you. Like, let us run, a free analysis of your data. And the cool thing is our technology makes it so I don't have to spend 10 hours doing client services thing. They click a couple buttons and out pops this beautiful analysis that should help their business. And if they like it, and which most of the time they do, they're like, oh, we should pay Nick.
Right. Which is the priority.
Well, so it's funny, right? Like our technology, without getting too much into it, it's very, very cheap, number one, which is nice to see from a customer's point of view. But number two, for a typical customer, we're saving them several $100,000 a month, right? You feel pretty good as a customer if somebody just saved you several $100,000, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes, those are the people that you definitely want on your team and to be helping you along the way. Now, one thing that I really love about your pitch, and we met via Podmatch, which I've talked about on the show before. Go check it out if you're wanting to be a guest. There's some really great benefits to it, as well as hosts looking for guests for their show. But one thing I really loved about your pitch, and I don't know if you specifically sent it or someone on your team doesn't, like, I honestly, oh, cool. I don't care either way. I've taken pitches from agencies or individuals. But one thing I loved is that you weren't just like a lot of the pitches that I do tend to get where it's like, hey, we're a financial advisory firm. I want to talk to your audience about money. like it was like, no, okay, you have a podcast about podcasting and these are some things that you're interested in or your audience is interested in because all that information is available for you. Let's go ahead and talk about how we're using podcast guesting and the strategic ways that we're doing it. And I think that one is just so gold. But what are some strategies that you're implementing to ensure that you are getting yeses to those podcast pitches? Because I know that can be a concern for quite a few people as well.
Sure. I think it's two things. Maybe three things. Number one is reaching out to podcasts where I have relevant experience, right? I'm not reaching out to, let's say, a spirituality podcast or a recovering alcoholics podcast because I don't have useful experience there. Number two is, I have a pretty strong background. I've been a CEO or CFO of legitimate companies. I did my MBA at Harvard Business School. So those are nice, things to talk about that kind of catch hosts' eyes, right? Hey, wouldn't it be nice to have somebody who went to Harvard Business School on your podcast, right? And number three, as you noticed, I personalize it, right? I'm not writing a generic, hey, I'm a financial company, I want to talk about my stuff. In your podcast is about podcasting as a viable strategy. And so I emphasize like, hey, this is something we're actively doing not only now, but in my prior business, which I ran, where podcasting was a core part of our content strategy. So that is relevant to you, perhaps. And so I think it's much more likely for you to say yes as a host, but for you to say yes in a way that I'm appearing on podcasts that are mutually beneficial to us rather than wasting both of our time and our listeners' times.
Yes. And I think that that's so important. Do you use any like AI tools or anything like that when you're like helping you or supporting you in coming up with pitches?
So I have AI tools scanned through to pass on stuff. So for example, on Podmatch, there's, I'm making up the number, 1,000 different podcasts out there. I had AI scan through and figure out, hey, here's the 150 you should appear on, and these 850, either you're not qualified for, or the audiences don't match, or it's just they're passes for various reasons. Perfectly legitimate podcasts,
Yeah.
just not relevant to kind of, or I would not bring any useful advice. So that's level one, just kind of as a filter. And beautifully, that does it automatically. And then level two is highlight like, hey, what part of my experiences are relevant to highlight to you, right? So in reaching out to the AIs know everything about my background. But when messaging you, I'm really going to focus on the parts of my background that are relevant to you again, as opposed to, another podcast, which I'm appearing on, which is for accounting. I'm going to much more focus on the technical aspects of my accounting and finance background, which are probably less relevant to you.
Right. Yeah. And I think that one, having those like, here are stories that I can tell, here are the things about my background that I think that podcast listeners across different, I was going to say genres. I'm a big reader. Not so genres, categories of podcasts can be really helpful. So like, for example, yes, I run a podcast production company, but it's not always great to just get on podcasts to talk about podcast strategies if it doesn't make sense for the audience. But maybe I go on a mom podcast where it's mom business owners. Maybe they just had someone to talk about podcasting. So it doesn't make sense for me to pitch that topic. So instead, maybe I pitch about imposter syndrome and how to get over, the blocks that come up when you want to share your content, but you're not really sure how to share them in a way that feels good, right? So I can spin it in any way that's going to make sense for that audience. And I think that's such an important part of pitching is if you are using AI tools to also use some of your own human brain to say, actually, I feel like this audience could really learn from this story that maybe I haven't shared with AI. Here's the story, AI. Now craft a pitch that makes sense.
Well, I agree with everything you said, but with one caveat. You said something that you haven't shared with AI. So I run a AI technology firm.
Right.
I spent a lot of time downloading as much of my brain as possible into the AI. So almost everything I know, like 99% of what I know, is truly available to the AI's context already. So there's very little that the AI doesn't know that I don't know, right? Which is both scary, but also incredibly efficient.
Yes. I think I recently asked my AI, I was like, tell me about myself, right? Just to kind of see what information does this thing have? And I thought it was really interesting. Like it was like, oh, you're married, you call your husband Hubs. I was like, I don't, but I do on like when I'm like quickly talking to it, like, hey, the Hubs is doing da 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 da. I need a plan for this. So I was like, you do that. You have 2 kids, one is autistic. I was like, actually, yes, that is true. Right. So like some of the information, I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. I don't know how I feel about this, but okay.
So, people are going through this entire kind of privacy fear about AI, like who's got our data, who's trading on our data, how's the data being used to filter or discriminate against me.
Right.
That's scary, but so I'm of the generation, Facebook was just launching when I started college, right? And I knew that the day I signed up for Facebook, I was giving up all privacy, right? So that was 20 odd years ago. I'm now very, very comfortable with the fact that privacy doesn't exist and have been for like 20 years. And whether that you call that Facebook, whether you call that TikTok, whether you call that AI, whether you call that Google's tracking your cookies, I'm kind of comfortable that almost everything about me is available to someone on the internet, whether I like it or not. And I just have to make peace with that.
Yes, it's definitely true. I don't know if you're on Threads, but Threads is the wild, wild west. And so like people
I am. I'm on it. I'm on everything, but thankfully I'm not a social media addict. With the exception of maybe YouTube Shorts, and I'm gonna block that sometime this week because it just keeps feeding me these amazing legal drama clips that I find because I love court dramas.
Yeah.
It's realized that the algorithms realize that, and I gotta block it.
I love that. Yeah, I think putting parameters around it too, right, can be really important when it comes to like tech and the things we're using, because we do want to be present in the real world as well. I know personally, I have my phone automatically turn off all social media block all notifications between 10 and 7. Well, 10 at night and 7 in the morning. And then I also have like a deep focus work where I will put my phone to that setting, and then my husband's not allowed to text me during that time. Like, you need to leave me alone. I need to do some work. You're literally in the living room. You're fine. So yeah, I think putting some parameters is good. But yeah, the algorithm knows us. A lot of our personal information is out there. So tell everyone if they're like, okay, Nick's chill. I like him. Let's learn more about what he has to offer. Can you tell us a little bit more about your product, your service, how you support people? So if people are interested, they can definitely go check that out.
Awesome. Yeah. So our company's called Eagle Rock CFO, whose website is eaglerockcfo.com. And what we've done is we've built a set of technology that allows you to look at all your accounting statements, and actually not just your accounting statements, all your company's data, and figure out, hey, what can you do right now to make more money next month? So as an example, one of our clients is a $20 million revenue Hollywood talent agency. We've been working with them for about 2 months, and I think we've saved them several $100,000. And last night we identified potentially another $1.5 million we can make them. And that's stuff that doesn't take 5 years. It's not a big grand strategic plan that'll take people working for months and months and months to implement. It's stuff that they can do right this week in a couple of hours that will make them more money next month. And the crazy thing is, that is all stuff people can do. But for human beings to do that as well as we did, it would have taken a team of very, very smart people working several weeks. And instead, we can do that in several hours. It's not only great for us, but it's great for them, because instead of charging our clients $100,000 or $500,000, we get to charge them $3,500 a month. And a few weeks ago, we actually just launched a software-only version where if you don't even want to talk to me, then you can just use a self-serve version of our software that does like 90% as well as I would.
What are some examples you can give of those more money-making tasks that people like those
Sure.
agencies
So
could be
an
using?
example is for this client, we discovered that they were spending money on these investment projects that they would actually lose money on. So they were spending, let's say, $100,000. They thought they were going to make $200,000, and they were making $200,000. Sounds great. Until you realize that the profit margin on the $200,000 was only 15%. So they're spending $100,000 for $200,000 of revenue. Seems great, but that $200,000 of revenue is only $30,000 of profit. So you're spending $100,000 to make $30,000, which is bad. So stuff like that, where you are kind of stuff may look like it's great on its face value, but is not. Another example is for another customer. We discovered that they were paying a bunch of software companies to do the same thing. And we're like, instead of paying 5 software companies that do the same thing, consolidate down to 2 or 3. Not only are you going to save $4,000 right away a year, but you will also not have to manage like 3 different or 5 different logins anymore.
Yeah, your productivity, I'm sure, goes to the roof as well. Awesome. So this is one, it sounds incredible. What are the types of businesses that you are really looking to support with this? What maybe is there a revenue level that
Sure.
they're at, or a business size?
Sure. So for our consulting service, where you don't have to talk to the technology, where we just do it for you, where I think the appropriate size is kind of somewhere north of $5 million of annual revenue. For the self-serve software, which is not only cheaper, but it's a lot easier to use, I think any business that's above probably $500,000 of revenue a year should be using a technology like ours, because it is affordable and it like generates a lot of value really quickly. And really any industry, by the way, is the cool thing. Like whether you are selling donuts, selling ads, or manufacturing industrial stuff, our technology, what it really does is it understands your business and then looks through all of your data. So it becomes like a deep expert really, really quickly, and then gives you advice the same way you would if you hired a great COO or a great CFO, because their entire job is to learn about your business and be a great advisor to you as the CEO or founder. And our technology is emulating that kind of behavioral pattern and expertise. We do offer a completely free version of our software that requires literally 30 seconds to set up. So we really recommend anyone of any size, go check it out. It's literally 2 clicks to connect to your accounting system. And it just works, creates these beautiful, not only graphs, but advice on how to make your business better.
Yeah, which is so important, especially for business owners who are maybe at that 500,000 and they have a very small team, or they're not at the point where they can hire a CFO to support them and give them advice. I think that understanding your numbers as a business owner is one of the best things that you can do for your business. And it's so incredibly important. So I love what you're doing. I think that it's great. Like I said, we'll make sure that we have links for all that in the show notes. Nick, where is the one place that you want people to go after listening to this conversation?
EagleRockCFO.com. It has all our socials, my email, everything, EagleRockCFO.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nick. I appreciate having you on.
Thank you so much.